There is a forest on the coast of Kenya, thick, ancient, largely untouched, and deep inside it, hidden beneath the jungle, lies the remains of a city that traded with the world, a city with stone palaces, grand mosques, and sophisticated water systems, a city that, at some point in the early 17th century, was simply abandoned. No clear explanation, no definitive record of what happened. This is Gedi, and what happened here remains one of the most debated mysteries on the East African coast. Stay with us, because this story is going to change how you see Africa. If you are new here, this is Untold Africa. Every week we tell one African story that history forgot. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss one. The earliest evidence for occupation at Gedi is a grave marker radiocarbon dated to between 1041 and 1278, placing the original settlement sometime in the 11th or early 12th century. Founded in the early 12th century, Gedi grew to become one of the largest and most prosperous coastal medieval towns on the East African coast, flourishing between the 14th and 15th centuries. Surrounded by remnant coastal forest and away from the coastline, Gedi was one of the most important Swahili cities on the East African coast. During its peak, it was part of a complex and international network of trade and cultural exchanges that crossed the Indian Ocean, linking African coastal centers with Persia and other parts of the ancient world. What made Gedi remarkable was not just its age, but what was found inside it. The settlement featured 2 rings of walls, public and private buildings, street patterns, tombs, an elaborate palace complex, and a grand mosque. Within the inner walls, remains of domestic, civic, and religious architecture, all constructed from local coral stone and lime mortar, laid out around a grid street pattern. The residents of Gedi lived in coral brick houses with running water and what appears to be flushing toilet systems, remarkably advanced infrastructure for a medieval settlement anywhere in the world. This was not a village. This was an organized, sophisticated, urban civilization. The artifacts recovered from Gedi's ruins tell a story of deep global connection. Archaeologists have found Ming Chinese vases and Venetian glass, as well as other artifacts from across the world, clear evidence that the Muslim inhabitants of this coastal town traded heavily with cultures far beyond their own region. Venetian beads, Ming Dynasty and Islamic pottery, Spanish scissors, items that had traveled extraordinary distances to end up in a city buried in a Kenyan forest. Among the most important trade commodities were pottery, glass, and beads, imported into Gedi, while ivory, gold, leopard skins, tortoise shells, and ambergris were commonly exported outward to the wider world. What this tells us is significant. While it is often assumed that pre-colonial Africa was isolated from the world, Gedi proves otherwise. The Gedi ruins correct the assumption that Africa was far behind the rest of the world before colonialism. Gedi was a cosmopolitan urban setting, connected to global trade networks at a time when many parts of the world were not. And yet, despite all of this, something strange. Little was known of this important Indian Ocean center of trade outside of local knowledge until the early 1920s, when the site was rediscovered and gained the attention of the British East African government. A city trading with China and Venice, and almost nobody outside the local area knew it existed. That silence is itself part of the mystery. In the first half of the 17th century, the last families left the town. They did not leave in a rush. Archaeological digs reveal an unexplained mass exodus from the city in the 17th century, a subject of much debate among historians and archaeologists today. The safe rooms, vault-like spaces built into every major house, had all been cleared out. Whatever was kept inside them was taken. The buildings were left standing, the streets were left intact, the mosque remained. But the people, and whatever they valued most, were gone. The abandonment of the settlement and the lack of any subsequent occupation has ensured a high level of archaeological authenticity. The ruins remain largely as they were left. Centuries of jungle growth, and the ruins of Gedi sit largely undisturbed, waiting, still without a complete explanation. If you are finding this story as fascinating as we do, take a second to like this video. It helps Untold Africa reach more people who need to hear these stories. Now, back to Gedi. Historians and archaeologists have proposed several explanations for Gedi's abandonment. None of them fully account for everything the evidence shows. The first theory, conflict. One significant event was the Wazimba raid along the East African coast in 1589, followed by the removal of the Sheikh of Malindi and the Portuguese to Mombasa in 1593, both of which would have severely disrupted the political and economic stability that Gedi depended on. Added to this was the overhanging threat of the Gala, a hostile nomadic ethnic group from Somalia, whose advancing presence along the coast created sustained pressure on settlements in the region. Gedi is believed to be a Gala word meaning precious, suggesting the Gala had significant interaction with the site at some point, either naming it or knowing it well enough to leave their mark on its identity. The second theory, the Portuguese. Evidence suggests the abandonment was partly due to Portuguese pressure at the time, which would have threatened trade and potentially led to armed incursions in the city. The disruption of the Indian Ocean trade networks that sustained Gedi would have slowly made the city economically unviable. The third theory, water. Signs that the well outside the mosque was progressively deepened point toward a struggle to access fresh water, suggesting the water table was falling. Another possible reason the site was eventually abandoned. Today, all the wells at Gedi have turned brackish, salt water where fresh water once sustained an entire urban population. Most historians now believe it was a combination of all these pressures, building over time, until Gedi became impossible to sustain. But combination theories rarely satisfy, because they still don't explain why nobody, in any language, wrote it down. There is another dimension to Gedi that no archaeological report fully addresses. The indigenous forest surrounding the ruins is still known as a sacred site for traditional rituals and sacrifices for the surrounding community. Local communities who live near Gedi maintain a deep spiritual relationship with the site. They speak of the old ones, the ancestors whose spirits are said to remain within the ruins, guardians of what was left behind. Visitors to the site have reported returning artifacts they removed, accompanied by accounts of unexplained misfortune following them home. Whether one believes in such things or not, the relationship between the local community and these ruins goes beyond archaeology. Gedi is not simply a historical site to those who live near it. It is a living spiritual place, and that, perhaps more than any academic theory, speaks to how deeply the disappearance of this city affected the people of this region. Something significant happened here, something that left a mark not just in the ruins, but in the memory and the spiritual life of the community that remained. Gedi was declared a national monument in 1927. Excavation began in 1948, and study of the area has continued intensively since. In 2024, Gedi was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, formally recognized as one of the most significant historical sites not just in Kenya, but on the African continent. Because Gedi was abandoned, its surviving ruins strongly demonstrate the characteristics of Swahili architecture and town planning, preserved in a way that continuously occupied sites rarely are. What Gedi tells us, beyond the mystery of its abandonment, is something important about Africa's history. The Gedi ruins reveal a completely different and less commonly known history of Africa. The ruins prove that advanced urban civilization, organized trade, sophisticated architecture and engineering existed on this continent long before the arrival of European colonizers. That is not a small thing. It is a correction of a historical narrative that has shaped how Africa has been seen by the world for centuries. Gedi stood, traded, built, and thrived. And then it was gone. We may never know exactly why, but we know it was here, and that is worth knowing. There is a forest on the coast of Kenya, and somewhere inside it, the walls of Gedi are still standing. The jungle has grown around them. The world largely moved on without them, but they are still there, patient, silent, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. This was Gedi, and this was Untold. Every week on Untold Africa, we tell one story that history forgot. Ancient cities, lost empires, mysteries that have never been solved. If this episode opened your eyes, subscribe now. Leave a comment telling us which African story you want us to cover next. And share this video with someone who thinks they know Africa, because they don't know the half of it. See you next week.